So how much land is needed to build a self-storage facility? Have you ever wondered how many storage units can I build on this piece of land I'm thinking of buying or that I already own? Let's dive into the topic of self-storage and building storage units. How much land do you really need to be able to create a profitable project? There's a lot of hype about self-storage right now, and developing self-storage facilities can be very lucrative, yet if you don't know how much land you're gonna need to build that facility on, you could make a big mistake. By the end of this video, I'm gonna give you a 3-step process of what type of land to look for, how much is it gonna cost, and what are the potential profits when building a facility. So, how much land do you really need? Well, first off, I would suggest that building is not the first thing you want to look at if you're getting into the business. Buying a facility is probably the right move to make if you're just starting out. But if you're determined to build a storage facility, I suggest at least 3 to 5 acres of land. Can you make an acre work? Maybe if you build 3 or 4 stories high, yet that's going to cost you a lot of money. Will an acre work for a small facility? Absolutely not. Do not build a small facility because it's not saleable. Nobody else wants to buy it because you can't cover the cost to actually manage it. So let's stay in that 3 to 5 acre range minimum, and the more land you get, the better, yet you don't want to build too big because there's problems there. So you're looking at 3 to 5 or maybe 10 acres of land for sale, but what type of land do I buy? Well, zoning is very important. If you buy a piece of land but you can't put storage on it, you put yourself in a bad position. So making sure the property is zoned for self-storage. What does that mean? Well, in every municipality there is a master plan that decides what is built where throughout the town. There's typically an overlay map that says storage is an approved use in these areas. And there's other areas where it's not an approved use. So if you're buying a piece of land and it is not an approved use, you have to go through an appeal or a variance, and that's a difficult process. I tried to do this once in my hometown in Las Vegas, where the parcel of land I bought was right along the I-15 interstate freeway. Very, very busy road. 100,000 people drive past this site every single day. Yet my neighbors had horses, there were houses, and they did not want a storage facility there. So I had a meeting with all the neighbors around the area, and they got to share their comments to the city council about my project. Well, it didn't go well. No matter how positive it was for the tax base, and no matter how close it was to other industrial or other busy roads like a highway, they didn't want the project there. And they came up with a lot of excuses that weren't even relevant. We were going to cater to the homeless, that they would live in there, or we would harbor sex trafficking, or we would create noise, or issues. We weren't doing any of it, and we wanted to be able to mitigate these risks and have this conversation with the neighbors, but the crowd got pretty excited and this wasn't going to happen. They were adamantly against it. They wanted their horse properties undisturbed, and ultimately the politician decided, no, I'm not going to approve this land site, so I was stuck with a piece of land that I couldn't put storage on, and that is a nightmare to have to get out of that. And even if you have a property that's zoned for self-storage, you still need to get a special use permit in most municipalities. In a perfect scenario, the use of self-storage is by right zoning. And if you have that, that's excellent, because that means no matter what, you are able to put a storage facility on this site because the zoning is by right. But if there's special use permits required, you still need to have a public hearing, you need to be able to present the project, and you can get denied. So, tip around buying land. Do not close on the land if you don't have to until you get your zoning permits. This is very important. All the value of your project is tied up in getting the right use, getting the permits to be able to build. So now that you have the permits, what do you do next? Well, one of the key people on your team in developing self-storage is a civil engineer. Remember that. A civil engineer is the engineer that designs the site. They're going to show where the drainage is, where the access is. They're going to research the setbacks and see how far back you have to build the buildings from the adjoining property owners or from the frontage road. This is going to tell you how many square feet of storage you're going to put on your site. This is a critical number, and we want to target at least 300 or 400 units or 40,000 square feet of storage. This is going to give you the layout, and this is going to help you start bidding your project so you can go out and get the actual cost. Now, I have a couple different paths that you can go here. You can hire a general contractor that specializes in building self-storage. I'm sure you can research your local area and find one that will develop it for you, and that cost involved is about a 10% markup of all your other costs. Or you can manage it yourself. So after you have your civil engineer drawings, it's really important to work with the right building manufacturer. I suggest TrackD.com. TrackD is a great company out of Wisconsin. I've worked with them many times. They provide quality buildings, they do it on time, and they hold their pricing. Might not be the cheapest, but you pay for quality. And what they'll do is they'll give you the cost of what your storage facility buildings will cost, because they're going to look at the civil engineer drawings and they're going to see this is the way that the site is laid out and these are the buildings you're going to need. Then they ship those buildings to the site after your concrete's been poured, after you've done the site work, and then I would suggest using their erection crew. These are crews that build storage 100 times a year. They're going to actually put together the pieces and build the buildings. So you need your civil engineer. You ideally want a general contractor when you're starting out. And then you need a good building manufacturer. The general contractor is going to manage all the other trades, like the concrete, like the site work, the electrician. Let them do that job, and then you don't have to deal with it and make some key mistakes. Here at Patriot, we do our own, yet in the beginning, when I started out and I didn't have a team, I didn't have a construction company, I hired a general contractor. That protected me, and I was happy to pay that extra 10% because I know the buildings were built right. So what are some of the other key things around the right location for this land? Well, easy access. People love convenience. That's what Americans pay for, proximity. So we got to be close to highways, major thoroughfares and streets. If you can smell a McDonald's or you can see a Walmart, that is a great location because other people are already going there all day long. And those people typically consume a large amount of goods. That's where there's going to be the demand for your facility. Next is flat, easy. You do not want to build a storage facility on a hill. That is a nightmare and your costs go through the roof. Next, you want to have jobs. You want to have housing in the area. Need density. People need to be congregating there in order to use your product. And then finally, visibility. Seeing the signage and having access off of some road that people are trafficking on is very important. I bought storage facilities in the back of industrial parks. It's very hard to make those profitable because people have to weave through a maze to get there to find you, and people want to see it. They want easy access in and out. So to get to the punchline, your costs could run anywhere between $50 a square foot all the way up to $100 a square foot. I know that's a broad range, yet there's so many factors in there that cause the cost to go up or to keep it down. In future videos, I'll get into how do you decrease the cost of building self-storage. That way you can stay on time and on budget and make the project profitable. How long does it take to make profits? Well, this is one of the reasons I say build 30, 40, 50,000 square feet to start so that you can fill that storage facility up in less than 3 years. Right now in 2025, it takes about 12 months to fill 12,000 square feet of storage. Now this can range widely all over the country. I'm giving you a good rule of thumb, but if you're building roughly 40,000 square feet and you're trying to fill it, that could take you 3.5 years to fill that facility up. This is patience. This is where development over the long haul can make you a lot of money, but in the short term, you don't make a lot of money. Now there's huge tax benefits to building self-storage, and we're gonna get into that in future videos. Yet from an ROI or return on investment standpoint, building doesn't yield you any cash flow at least 2 or 3 years depending on the site. We want to hit break even as fast as possible. So what's a good break even point for a storage development? Well, 50% is an excellent number. That means 50% occupancy in the facility will then pay for the cost of the debt that you got to actually build the facility. If you don't achieve that 50% occupancy, then you're paying on interest over time and you're not cash flowing. So it's really critical you pick the right site that there's demand so people fill it up and you can at least cover your debt. When do you hit profits? Well, that following year is critical because now you want to target that 80 to 90% occupancy. And if you built at the right cost and you bought the land at the right cost, now you can generate a larger return on investment because now you have your tenants there and they're all paying and you're now able to cover your expenses and cash flow. So focus on the break-even point. If your break-even point is above 60 or 65%, be careful doing the project. You have to cover the operating expenses to run the facility, and you have to cover your debt. If there's not enough money left over and you still don't have any square footage to fill up, then you're just building for the sake of building and there are not going to be profits left over for you to actually benefit from all the time and energy to go through this process of development. So hit that break-even point below 60% occupancy. That's a very good rule of thumb. One key tip with building a storage facility is having reserves. This isn't a low money down endeavor. We're gonna get into financing in other videos of how to get a loan to build a storage facility. One of my favorite strategies is SBA financing. Still, you need operating cash as reserves. So what does that mean? Well, in the beginning, before you break even, you have to have available funds there to pay the costs, taxes, insurance, management, maintenance, utilities, the admin. All these things need to be paid for while you're just generating revenue. And then also an interest reserve. That's the money used to pay the loan as you start drawing on more and more of your construction loan and paying on that debt. So having a healthy reserve account of at least 12 months of expenses and 12 months of interest is critical for you to have that dry powder to be able to hit that break-even point. Because if you run out of money, you could lose the property before you even get open. So to address the real question in this video is how many units can I fit per acre? Well, a safe ratio is about 30 to 35% of the land is used for storage. So if you have an acre, you can build about 10 to 15,000 square feet of storage. That's about 100 units. So for every acre, you can build about 100 units of storage. That gives you a good idea. If you have 5 acres and there's no major restrictions on the land with easements or drainage issues or wetlands, you can fit up to 500 units on that site. Now, an engineer is going to give you the exact number, but this is a good rule of thumb. If you're going to go multiple stories or if you're going to go with really big buildings with hallways, yes, you can fit more. You could fit possibly 40%, maybe 45% coverage of the acreage that you have, meaning you could almost fit half of that land as storage. But as a conservative rule, 30 to 35% of the overall land could be buildings. That's why you need at least that 3 to 5 acres if you're gonna have wide drive aisles so people can pull their car into a unit. They can have 2 cars driving by each other. There's enough room to push the snow if you're in a cold weather climate. There's enough room for the water to drain and go into a retention pond. So buy 3 to 5 acres and get that 300 to 400 units minimum if you're gonna do a site. My favorite thing is to buy a facility that's already existing, and I did this when I started out in a little town in New Hampshire, right on the border of Vermont, where I bought a facility with 3 buildings. There was 100 units, but it had an additional 5 acres of land. That way I was able to improve the first 100 units. I was full, the rents were low, and I knew there was more demand. And I could see a Walmart right across the street. So I ended up building another 100 units. And I filled those up over a couple years. I ended up building another 150 units, and I filled those up after a year. And then I ended up building another 250 units. So now I have 600 units in this town where I started out with just 100 units, and I never had to start from scratch. I always was cash flowing along the way and showing my bank I can profit from each phase of this property as I build because I'm doing it in sections. I'm doing it one step at a time over a series of years rather than all at once. If you build them all at once, you have all that interest that you're paying and you're not sure if there's going to be demand or if the economy is going to change. So buying an existing facility and expanding it is my favorite strategy if you're just starting out in the business. And in the next video, we're going to go over construction costs. What are the real costs to build these facilities and what makes sense for you if you're just starting out in the business? So click on the video above. We'll teach you exactly what to look for when putting together your self-storage facility budget, or put in the comments that you would like a sample budget from us. We're happy to share it with you and share your stories. Have you built storage for cheaper? Or have you built storage for more money than I'm quoting right now? I'd love to hear your projects and I'll share some of mine with you.